Marjorie Garber and her exploration of bisexuality in Shakespeare's sonnets. And Professor Garber was writing more than 25 years ago when the critical assumption about the young man and the dark lady was still, absolutely seen as this is what these poems are about. Now, that story, which we're trying to debunk, is a bisexual story. And that story comes together famously in Sonnet 144, which is the one that begins, two loves have I have of comfort and despair. The better angel is a man right fair, the worser angel a woman coloured ill. Those are the two subjects in one poem. That particular poem has therefore been used to somehow cast a net or and bring a sense of unity to all 154 poems. But it's a bisexual story, and because it's a story which has been thought to have some connections with Shakespeare's life, it's also been a weird sort of alibi that Shakespeare's life was not really like this. He was really heterosexual, and he had a wife and children, and so the fictionality of the sonnets has somehow put Shakespeare's life at one remove, at the same time as wanting them to be personal. With the uncoupling of the ordering of the 1609 sonnets, what we found is that the really personal poems, which might be about, let's say, triangular relationships, shine even more brightly than they did when, as it were, they were buried among the traditional story. And there are three love triangles in Shakespeare's sonnets: sonnets 40, 41, and 42, and sonnets 133, I think, and 134 is another love triangle.
I don't think we should be surprised to find.
It's about a love triangle.
I don't think we should be surprised to find this bisexuality. It certainly is unusual to find it expressed as strongly as Shakespeare does in the sonnet beginning, "Two loves have I of comfort and despair," referring to a male beloved and a female beloved. Some years ago, I published a book called Shakespeare, Sex and Love, in which I discussed a lot of facets of sexual relationships in Shakespeare's time. And of course, the most famous bisexual in Shakespeare's time was the king, King James I, who pleaded to be allowed to express his love for the Duke of Buckingham. He was a married man, of course. The king was married, had children, Prince Henry and Princess Elizabeth. And there's a very, very touching and moving letter in which he requests and does plead and beg his fellow solicitors, his fellow courtiers, to allow him to express his love for a man as well. And it's clearly he's expressing a sexual love. So we shouldn't be all that surprised to find bisexuality in poems written during this period, even though we don't find it so much as far as I know, in many other poets.
I mean, Marjorie Garber, to go back to her endeavour, she was breaking new ground because she was trying to characterise bisexuality in literature across a long period of time. And her book called Vice Versa is an important book because it's about bisexuality, and there are not many books about bisexuality in literature when you start to look. And she alighted on Shakespeare's sonnets as being, a great example of this kind of writing. Our book, I think, has sort of amplified Marjorie Garber's understanding and refreshed it and done something different with it, and certainly made it, we think, more personal to Shakespeare. And I think more and more that, well, I suppose like James I, Shakespeare himself understood what it was to love both men and women
simultaneously, even.
And maybe that's, I mean, then what do you do with that? Well, then do you say, ah, well, that's why some of the sonnets are full of anguish. Well, and that's a different critical conversation.
In other words, our book does have strong implications for biographies of Shakespeare and should be reflected in any biography, I think.